Ladies and gentlemen, Alexandrom Paynom. Thank you so much. Hello. Wait. We have to get the volume a little bit up. Yeah. You have it. Yeah. First of all, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us, and congratulations once again. I watched it today for the second time and was again overwhelmed with the wealth of ideas that are in this film. It's really a beautiful experience to watch it, and I hope the audience shares that idea. Do you have any immediate questions? If not, maybe they're as overwhelmed as I am. So maybe just for starters, the idea, where did it come from? How did it evolve? It seems very much a timely movie, a movie that is completely in tune with what is going on today. But on the other hand, as far as I know, it has taken a while before it actually premiered.
Yeah, we meaning Jim Taylor, my co-writer, and I wanted this to be our next film after Sideways many years ago. We finished that in 2005, and I wanted to do maybe something with a little bit more political, social, satiric conscience, a little bit like our first two films, Citizen Ruth and Election, which had some degree of political metaphor in them. And also Bush had been reelected, and we thought he was bad. So we thought it would be nice to, do something a little bit political, but we didn't have the metaphor. And then because you can't do something literal. And then I remembered that Jim and his brother had for many years played with the idea of what life would be like if you were this small. And I thought, well, how would that really happen? Well, probably it would be proposed as a solution for overpopulation and climate change. And then some of the mental dominoes began to fall after that. So we pursued. I wanted to make this in 2006, but it was delayed. And thanks for saying that the issues are timely. I guess that's good for the film, but it makes me sad. And, probably the issues that the film touches will be even more timely 10 years from now, and 20 years from now, and 30 years from now. Are you doing simultaneous translation?
No, we asked before, and everybody says they understand English, so we can keep it in English. So it was concretely 10 to, or even more than 10 years that it took. What were the main things that actually delayed it?
Two things. One was the screenplay. The idea is so big that really it could have been a TV series. If you create a world in which downsizing, miniaturization exists. We had so many ideas, and in fact, but we wanted to make a movie, not a TV show. So if the screenplay of the movie you saw tonight feels like many movies in one, or a little bit schizophrenic, it's because we had so many ideas that were going in different directions, and we had to squeeze them all into one feature-length film. Mm-hmm. So that was number one, was getting the screenplay. It took us years. And then it was almost impossible to find the financing. And nobody wanted to pay for it, and maybe with good reason, because it's not making any money right now. I think it's going to be a disaster. I think they're going to lose all their money with this movie. But anyway, I got it made.
Yeah. Congratulations for making it. Actually,
I hope I can make another movie.
Sorry? There was a Sideways 2 request.
Maybe. Oh, by the way, because you're in Ljubljana, by the way, I wish I could be with you. I asked Zizek to be in the film. I had a section of the film where people are being interviewed. Now the whole section is gone. But I had shot and planned this section of the film where, like in the movie Reds, you know, where people are talking about the impact of miniaturization on the world. It has kind of a documentary feel. And I thought it would be great to have Slavoj Žižek in the film. And we were in touch about it, and he liked the idea. You know, he liked the attention, but he couldn't do it finally.
He hasn't seen it yet.
I don't know.
You
I don't know.
Yeah. I was actually thinking, I mean, I was talking about this density of ideas, but also actually there are so many subversive, political, radical ideas in there. Did you ever feel that this was an unproducible film by the studios, that they would never go for it, or did you keep on believing this will work?
No, and then some critics are seeing the film now and saying, well, it's not political enough. You know, it suggests these ideas, it talks a little bit about environmentalism and consumerism and capitalism and immigration and classism, that it acknowledges those things, but it doesn't have a strong enough political. So, man, you can't please everybody.
Why do you have the Serbian character in the movie? Why is Dusan there?
Why not Slovenian? He could have been Slovenian. Well, look, I wanted to have somehow the character of the cynical black marketeer, and we just thought, why not make him Serbian?
Will that do? That does.
And I wish I had, if this were a cheaper movie, I could have had a Serbian actor play it. But because I needed so much money to get the financing, I had to have, you know, for the three main parts, I knew the Vietnamese woman would probably be an unknown. And I had Matt Damon. And like I say, if it had been a cheaper movie, I would have gotten a Serbian actor. But I had to have another kind of star in that part in order to help get the financing.
One more question regarding the budget and the production situation. To what extent is actually budget, especially a huge one like this one, weighing on the shoulders of an auteur like you are? So in terms of being able and continuing to do what you want to do. Because if you look at these 7 films as a whole, as a body, I mean, it's amazing how you are there so prominently in every one of them, and how you keep on doing this, I mean, within the system.
Even though this was a much bigger budget than anything I had before, I still had complete control. I had final cut in my contract. I was able to make it with the controls that I've had on previous smaller films. I'm doing an interview.
Hello.
My nephew just came in.
Not the neighbor Dusan. Yeah. Not the neighbor Dusan, no.
Right. So, on the other hand, I was at the Telluride Film Festival in September, and Francis Coppola was showing a restored version of his 1982 film, The Cotton Club, which at the time had received many, many cuts, and the film suffered as a result. And the footage, now half hour, 40 minutes, that he put back were fantastic. And suddenly the film really joins, I think, The Godfathers and the Conversation and Apocalypse Now as one of his masterpieces. And they asked him kind of the same question, you know, why did you make the cuts in the first place? Didn't you have didn't you have control? And he said something I could relate to. He said, well, you know, I did, of course. I'm Francis Coppola. I had control. But you know, there's a lot of money and people make suggestions, and because you have final cut, you know, you're very open to listening to their suggestions, and even out of politeness, you go, well, that's an interesting idea. Well, so before you know it, over the course of months, you know, it's death by 1,000 little cuts. I didn't have that exactly. What you see is finally what I was able to make from what I shot, but there's kind of an unspoken feeling of pressure, which even then is good to avoid. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, look, in the old days, even a big movie like Lawrence of Arabia or Godfather Part 2 cost nothing compared to what it would cost to make those films today. Mm-hmm. You know, it's so, I look forward now to making a smaller film. Here's one other thing here's a third part of the answer too. is the machinery of any filmmaking in general, but particularly American filmmaking. I mean, if there were going to be someone just shooting me making a Skype interview with you, you know, I just need a camera and 2 lights. There would be 30 fucking trucks outside. You know, the machinery of American filmmaking is part of what makes it so expensive. And I get frustrated by, same word, the machinery. I always feel that it brings too much pressure to, you know, intimate things that you want to film. And I always fear that that heavy machinery and so many hundreds of people around while you're shooting, that it can mar, that it can restrict the intimacy of the feeling between the actor and the directors, the director and the actors.
Do you sometimes think of working in other production contexts like Europe, or do you work on that?
Yeah. I speak fluent Spanish, and I'm pretty good in Greek. And I now have a Greek wife, and my new daughter is born in Greece, and so anyway, yes, there's too much weird pressure on American filmmaking right now, even for the 8 or 10 decent, you know, mature, literate films that are able to be made in America every year and distributed. You know, it's such a small percentage of what's made, and the pressure is to do these ridiculous movies, you know, or to take something into, I mean, the only reason only one studio would make this film is that, you know, a couple of the studio presidents told me the script is too intelligent for us at that budget. and no, it's the business they're in. And they said, if we made it with you, we would ask you to make it stupider, and we know you don't want to do that. You know, they're very rational about what they do, like in the concentration camp. So anyway, the answer is yes. And if anybody has a good screenplay for me, I'm ready. I'm open. I have no idea what my next film is.
Well, that's also something I want.
Salvini, I'm happy to.
Good. Any offers?
What is the most important thing you want people to walk out of the movies with this film?
If you're asking about theme or message, I can't talk about that. I'm not supposed to, my director's contract. I shouldn't talk about theme or message. Now, but as a filmmaker in general, I'll give you a basic answer that I hope you think you saw a good movie that was entertaining and made you think a little bit.
And how is this experience for you, this Skype interview with the whole movie?
Fun, wonderful. I honestly, I wish I were there. I've never visited Ljubljana, and we know each other from Bologna. We go to this wonderful film festival every summer in Bologna. I'm happy to do, you know, he said, look, just record hello to the audience, you know, unless you want to do a Q&A, but I'm sure you don't want to. I said, no, I'd rather do the Q&A.
Great, thanks again.
Yeah, no problem.
Another question?
It was a long process of writing, and you have a lot of time to think the project. Have you ever in this period been afraid of the project, such big projects, such big post-production and all these things? You know, there's a lot of time that you are a little bit afraid, you try to escape and returning to the project. So what was your experience through this project? You were all the time, you can be all the time 100%. So I'm interested in your experience during preparing this fiction.
It's no different from making any other film. It was just more of it. Any film, are you a filmmaker yourself, by the way?
Yes.
Yes, he is.
So as you know, every film you make, you both are dying to make it and completely afraid of it. You, like many things in life, you know, I want to live, but I smoke cigarettes. I have, you know, you want, but you push away at the same time. I wanted to make this film, though, very much. It's why it was such a long time between Sideways and The Descendants. It was 6 years between those films because I didn't give up on this screenplay. I just thought it was a good idea for a movie. I'm not sure if the final movie is great, but the idea is great. And I knew also that if you're talking about the visual effects and the thousands of extras and, you know, all the machinery I keep talking about, yeah, it's a little scary, but also fun. You know, it's fun to learn all that stuff. I mean, I'm 56 years old right now, and it's nice to learn new tricks in filmmaking. But I have the same level of eagerness and fear of not just every film, but every day of shooting. You know, what's the hardest part of filmmaking really is getting out of the car every morning.
And as an artist, as a filmmaker, you are there from conception over writing to casting to directing, working with actors, editing, in all the phases. What is the phase that gives you the most satisfaction, fulfillment? What makes you most happy?
I like scouting locations.
Come to Ljubljana.
Yeah, because then you're out in the world and, you know, I've got the blueprint, I have the idea of the film, I have the screenplay, but now you want to make it a reality. And I like very much, you know, I wish I could go to everyone's house in the entire world and see how they live, you know, and meet them. I like that. I like some days of directing when you get a very good piece of performance. Like in this movie, the shot of the Vietnamese woman when she's at the table, very simple shot, but also a difficult shot, where she says, yes, yes, Norway, I go Norway too. Jesus, give me good gift, I go Norway with you. Unbelievable bit of performance, one take. That's a memorable and beautiful moment. And then in general, though, I like editing. The only reason you write and direct is to get things to edit. So I'm happiest in the editing room.
You mentioned Hong Chow. How did you find her? Who is she? Where does she come from?
She is Vietnamese. Her parents had to flee as refugees, Vietnam at the very end of the war. Hong Chow was born at a refugee camp in Thailand and spent 2 or 3 years there, and then her family emigrated to Louisiana, to New Orleans, in the south of the United States. There are many Vietnamese people there because of the shrimp industry. In the old country, they did shrimp, and they found a place where they could do shrimp in America. Her family doesn't do shrimp. They own corner stores, you know, where you can get cigarettes and Coca-Cola and everything. She was the first person ever in her family to attend university, Boston University, but not as an actor. She wasn't interested. She likes movies. She went as a film student. And then while acting in her comrades' films, they would say, wow, Hong, you're pretty good. Have you ever thought about acting? No. Really, really, you're good. She got the message, and after university moved to New York and took acting classes and then started getting work. The only thing I had seen her in was Paul Thomas Anderson's Inherent Vice. She plays a prostitute.
And she came to a casting?
She auditioned, yeah. She came in on
audition.
casting. Yeah.
Regarding the idea of the film, were you familiar with Arne Hendricks, the artist who made the Incredible Shrinking Man?
You mean Jack Arnold? You mean the movie?
No, the artist. No? You're not familiar with this, the guy?
You're talking about painting or drawing?
Yes. I mean, philosophy and...
This is the first time I'm hearing of it.
All right. Because the idea is, he has the same idea, same philosophy, and it's, yeah.
How do you spell his name?
A-R-N-E.
Okay.
H.
Yes.
E. Ndriks.
What nationality is he?
I think he's Dutch.
Okay, great. I'll look for it. Thank you.
Yeah. He also talked on TEDx, so about the shrinking man, and
Okay,
I'm sorry,
good.
I thought you were familiar with because it's so similar. It's just the same idea, and well.
Okay. Thank you. There's a discovery. Another question?
I'm interested in the collaboration with Udo Kier. How did that happen? Because he was in Slovenia a couple of years ago, I think, at a film festival, actually, and he proved to be a very interesting figure.
Well, look, for those of us film buffs, it's Udo Kier, you know, from the Paul Morrissey, Andy Warhol movies from the 60s. And we had written the part as a Dutchman, that he was a Dutch seaman. Anyway, somehow the casting director thought of Udo Kier, and I said, that sounds perfect. I had thought, when I was writing, I was thinking more of another German. I was thinking of Barbe Schroeder. I thought he could be interesting in the part, but he's a little bit too old maybe for the part, and I don't know how comfortable he would be as an actor, but kind of that vibe. And Udo Kier, I contacted him. My wife and I drove, it's 90 minutes from Los Angeles, the desert town of Palm Springs, where he lives. He lives alone with his dogs and his art collection. And I spent the day with him, and he said yes. And nicest guy in the world, by the way. Super sweet guy.
I mean, in those 7 films, feature films, you've worked really with some amazing actors and stars and superstars. Do you want to share anything about that in terms of how do you work with them? Because somehow the stars and the other actors, everything, you know, again, the interaction between now Matt Damon and Hong Chow is really magnificent. And you're dealing with 2 stars, basically. So you have anything like working with Jack Nicholson, working with George Clooney? It's the same working with them or with other actors, if you work with Bruce Dern?
Kind of. I mean, I work with 3 or 4 different types of actors in every film. One is the big star, and then other professional actors. And then you have lesser known professional actors. You know, you don't know them, but they, you know, have 1 line, 2 lines, 5 lines. Then non-professional actors, maybe from a local community theater or something like that. And then a lot of non-actors. I have a modus operandi now for getting faces from the street, basically, and then finding if they will be strong enough to do something I couldn't do, which is to be natural in front of the camera. So I have, you know, different techniques for dealing with each of them. But that's the feeling, that's the texture I want in the film. Is I think that if you put Jack Nicholson acting with someone from the street, each makes the other look better. The non-professional, the non-actor helps Jack Nicholson look more real, like he's really from real life, and then his presence helps the non-actor appear that he's acting better than perhaps he is. But one thing I have to tell you about working with Nicholson and Clooney, is there another one? Matt Damon almost, is actors who have directed movies. And sometimes we think, oh, well, the actor who has directed, he's going to be very difficult because he's going to want to direct it himself and give you unwanted suggestions, when in fact the opposite is true. Because those actors have directed, they know what pains in the asses actors are. And they know the difficulty of the director's problems every day. And they really seek to make my life easier, not harder.
And what about cinematographers?
What about them?
I mean, in terms of, I mean, you've worked with a few over a number of films in does a specific project go with a specific or not?
Only just 3. No, I've really only worked with 3 cinematographers. I had a main cinematographer for my first 3 films, Jim Glennon, and then I had Payne Papamichael, my good friend, on the last 4 films. And then I have a Serbian second unit cinematographer, Radan Popovic, who's been my second unit cinematographer since election for many, many years. So, no, I try to just think whom I want to work with and then adapt his style to the film.
Yeah.
To date, although that could change. That could change.
You touched now sci-fi. Are there any other genres that you want to go into? Anything? Horror?
Any good story, anything. I dream, like many directors, I dream of making a Western.
Wonderful. Looking forward.
Now in the age of Trump and the many ways in which the world is spinning in the wrong direction, it seems like in the 1950s, a good time for science fiction and horror as metaphors. You know, we had the wonderful film Get Out this year.
Yes.
A horror film, but with a racist political point of view. And I don't know, it just seems like maybe it's time to remake Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yes.
Last time that was remade it's been 40 years. It was 20 years from the first one to the second one, and now 40 years since the last one. But I'd like to do anything. I'll do anything. So if you have any suggestions, let me know.
Any suggestions? Any questions?
Hello.
Hi.
I have 2 questions. The first one is, do you personally believe that downsizing will be possible in the near future? Or is it just like a fantasy of yours? And the second one, if it was possible today, would you downsize?
I'm so tempted to have fun with the first part of your question. Say, oh yes, well, you know, the technology exists, but it's been purchased by clothing companies. No, and in fact, that's part of the pessimistic point of view of the film is that really the only solution that we can think of, miniaturization, is impossible. So I think we're in a lot of trouble. And as for the second part of the question, I don't know how to answer that question. I've been asked that a lot of times, no offense, for the interviews for the film, and I can't even think of a funny answer for that. And I don't really know.
Any last question? Because otherwise I still have one. If you don't believe in downsizing, do you believe in time travel? And if you do, to which period in American film history would you transport yourself?
All right. In general, because we have arthroscopic surgery now and contact lenses and all these wonderful parts of medicine, I don't really want to go back in time. However, it would have been so fantastic to be in LA in the 20s and work in silent comedy. That period, those 10 or 15 years for silent comedy were one of those magical periods like Florence during the Medicis, like 5th century BC Athens, one of those great flowerings of, French Impressionism that come once every few hundred years. And it's a magical, magical time. And to be with those guys, with that energy, Keaton, Chaplin, Lloyd, Hal Roach, Max Sennett, that whole world would have been very exciting. And a lot of important directors from the talking period got their training then. Frank Capra, Leo McCarey, George Stevens all started directing silent comedy. I would very much have liked to do that too.
actually that would bring you here, because this theater opened on the 1st of October 1923. So we would have seen your full movie then here. And
good.
so that's the beginning of the time travel. Thank you very much for this lovely conversation, and we hope we will be able to welcome you next time in Ljubljana.
Thanks for inviting me.